The cargo bay of Station Kepler 442 smelled of rust and recycled air. Juno Red wiped grease from her hands onto her already stained coveralls, squinting at the malfunctioning coolant line that had brought her to this forgotten corner of the station. The hum of distant engines provided a constant backdrop, but something else caught her attention, a sound that didn't belong. A whimper. High-pitched and desperate. Juno froze, her toolbox clattering slightly as she set it down. The station had been experiencing minor system failures for weeks. But this was different. This was organic, living. She followed the sound past crates of medical supplies and decommissioned mining equipment, her boots echoing against the metal floor. In the shadows behind a stack of cargo containers, two small forms huddled together, trembling violently. "Oh hell," Juno breathed. They were clearly alien, their bodies covered in soft, silvery fur that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. 4 legs each, with oversized paws and ears that drooped against their heads. Their eyes, large and luminescent like twin moons, stared up at her with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. They couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. The creatures pressed against each other, their trembling so intense that Juno could see the vibrations from where she stood. One of them, slightly smaller than the other, let out another pitiful whimper. Juno's heart clenched. She'd seen abandonment before, back on Earth, back when she was just a kid working in her father's garage. But here, on a space station? Who would abandon these tiny things in a cargo bay? Hey, she said softly, crouching down and extending her hand slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The puppies, she couldn't think of them as anything else, shrank back further. Their trembling intensified. Juno had dealt with scared animals before. Patience was key. She sat down cross-legged on the cold floor, making herself smaller, less threatening. She pulled a protein bar from her pocket, her lunch, and broke off a small piece. "You hungry?" she asked, tossing the piece gently toward them. The smaller one sniffed the air, its nose twitching. After what felt like an eternity, it took a tentative step forward, still shaking like a leaf in a storm. It sniffed the food, then gobbled it down desperately. "That's it," Juno encouraged. "There's more where that came from." She tossed another piece, this time closer to herself. The puppy followed, its sibling close behind. Their trembling hadn't stopped, but hunger seemed to override fear. Within minutes, both puppies were close enough for Juno to touch. She reached out slowly, letting them smell her hand first. The smaller one, the braver of the two, licked her fingers with a tongue that felt surprisingly warm. "You're okay now?" Juno whispered. "I've got you." She scooped them both into her arms. They weighed almost nothing, and she could feel their rapid heartbeats against her chest. The trembling continued, their bodies shaking so hard she worried they might be sick. Juno carried them back to her workshop, a cramped space filled with tools, half-finished projects, and the smell of machine oil. She cleared off her workbench and set them down gently, wrapping them in a thermal blanket she kept for cold nights. "Let's see what we're dealing with," she muttered, pulling up her datapad and scanning them. The results made her jaw clench. Varani pups. A species from the Outer Rim, known for their intelligence and loyalty. Also known for being extremely valuable on the black market. Someone had brought these babies here to sell them and then abandoned them when a deal went south. The scan also showed something else. They were malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from severe stress. The trembling wasn't just fear, it was their bodies shutting down. "Not on my watch," Juno said firmly. She spent the next hour researching Varani physiology, mixing a nutrient formula from medical supplies she borrowed from the station's stores. She fashioned a makeshift bed from insulation foam and heating elements, creating a warm nest that mimicked what she imagined their homeworld would feel like. The puppies watched her with those luminous eyes, still trembling but with less intensity now. When she offered them the formula in a shallow dish, they lapped it up eagerly. "Good," Juno said, allowing herself a small smile. "You're fighters." Days blurred together. Juno spent every spare moment with the pups, nursing them back to health. The station's other mechanics noticed her distraction but said nothing. Juno had a reputation for being prickly, and most people left her alone. The smaller, braver puppy began following her everywhere, its trembling gradually subsiding into occasional shivers. Juno started calling her Tavi, after an old Earth word for eighth. She'd found them on the 8th day of the station's maintenance cycle. Tavi's sibling remained more cautious, but even he began to relax, his trembling finally stopping on the 4th day. Juno called him Kes, You two are something else, Juno said one evening, watching them play fight in their makeshift nest. Tavy pounced on her brother, her silvery fur now glossy and healthy. But Juno knew this couldn't last. The station authorities would eventually discover the pups, and then what? They'd be confiscated, processed, maybe returned to their homeworld or worse sold to the highest bidder. She made her decision that night. Using contacts from her years as a freelance mechanic, Juno arranged for falsified documentation. According to the new records, Tavy and Kes were registered emotional support animals. Legally bonded to Juno Red, it cost her 3 months' worth of savings and a few favors she'd have to repay. But it was worth it. When the station administrator came knocking a week later, Juno presented her paperwork with a steady hand. Emotional support animals? The administrator asked skeptically, eyeing Tavy, who was currently chewing on Juno's boot. That's right, Juno said. Got the permits and everything. Fully legal. The administrator sighed, scanning the documents. Everything checked out. Fine, but they're your responsibility. Any damage, any incidents. Won't be any, Juno interrupted. I take care of what's mine. After he left, Juno picked up Tavy, who licked her face enthusiastically. Kes wound around her ankles, purring a sound like distant thunder. Hear that? Juno whispered to them. You're mine now. And I don't abandon family. The trembling was gone. In its place was trust, absolute, unconditional trust. And as Juno looked into Tavy's luminous eyes, she realized something. She'd been abandoned once too, in her own way. Left behind by a system that didn't care about mechanics or orphans or anyone who didn't fit neatly into boxes. But humans had a funny way of surviving. Of finding family in the strangest places, of turning abandonment into belonging. That was the human way. And Juno Red wouldn't have it any other way.